All right, welcome back. Let's just try once again to reconnect with the former public protector, Advocate Thuli Madonsela, who delivered the inaugural Marikana Memorial lecture on Friday. Prof, are you able to hear me this time around?
Yes, ma'am. I can hear you perfectly, Palisa. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much indeed. And apologies once again. So I was saying to you that you said in your speech you like the fact that Sibanye-Stillwater is putting people first. But we had Bishop Josioka on the channel this morning who said that Sibanye has not moved past the minimum wage that was achieved by the former Lonmin CEO, basically saying that they haven't done anything beyond the initial work that he actually started. What do you have to say?
Firstly, I cannot contradict Bishop Siwoka. He has been in the system. Him, together with Mr. Matunjwa, have been in the system longer than I have been. And if he says they haven't moved enough, I have no reason to contradict him. But the information I had and still do have is that Sibanye wants to co-create the future, and they're inviting all parties concerned to revisit the reasons why we ended up with the conflict that led to people dying before the 16th and ultimately people dying on the 16th. For me, that's a new vision, because conflict does not only arise from the fact that there's extractive relationships between labor and capital. Conflict also arises when there's no room to sit around the table and talk about differences.
You also talk about the concept of just capital, how companies operating in communities can, of course, this in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, consider the entire ecosystem and help communities find their own sources of work, wealth, and well-being. What do you mean about this?
Absolutely. My linking what Sibanye-Stillwater is doing with Just Capital came from the fact that in the lecture, I was asked to talk about moving forward for the Marikana region as a whole, building a new future, an inclusive future for the Marikana region. And of course, an inclusive future means not just the employees of Sibanye-Stillwater, formerly Lonmin. It means a future for everyone in that community. And I made an example of a company that is known globally. It has always taken the approach that companies exist within an ecosystem. You can't just go into a village and exploit everything and extract everything and leave the villages with devastation, which is what mines normally do. And if we look again at the situation in the Platinum Belt, the Baboba Mogale community is left poor and devastated despite having had large reserves of platinum. So part of it is because of that historical extractive relationship. And just apart from low wages, the village itself has not been developed despite the fact that they had large reserves of platinum.
So we understand, Prof, now you've offered to use your position as the Stellenbosch University's Law Trust Chair in Social Justice to ensure that the families of the victims of the Marikana massacre finally get justice. Talk to us about this decision.
Well, I was put on the spot by Mr. Froniman if I would join them from Sibanye-Stillwater in making sure that there's justice. And I had no hesitation to do that because I had already started working with the Baboba Mogale people to get justice for whatever was lost by that community. Incidentally, after I made that commitment, I have since been approached in writing by the board of the Baboba Mogale to help them get justice for whatever was lost by them. I must indicate, though, dear colleague, that I will not get in the way. If unions feel that they don't want this help, I would not interfere. When it comes to Baba Mokale, I now have a request in writing from their side to join in, because our interest is to make sure that there is justice, to make sure that we acknowledge what happened in the past, that people died, people were maimed, and that people need healing from that process. And if we can expedite the process of healing and allow people to get closure, that would be the contribution we would like to make as the chair in social justice at Stellenbosch University.
Because I wanted to get more clarity, Prof, as to what exactly does this help that you're referring to entail? Because we've got people complaining that 8 years later, justice has not been served for the victims of Marikana, people saying that the widows still have to struggle on a daily basis. But on the other hand, there are also people who are saying that no one has been held to account. Those responsible have not been prosecuted. The recommendations of the Falam Commission have not been implemented. So how would you go about dealing with this issue? As you say that healing and closure is important, and yet we know that some of the victims have still not been compensated.
Absolutely. The kind of help we would like to provide is threefold. The first is working with the families and the lawyers that have been carrying this can for quite a long time to address the Minister of Justice and the Minister of Police and ask them to expedite the process of ensuring there's accountability for crime. For all of the 44 people that we killed in Marikana in those fateful days. So that's the criminal justice system. The second part is to work with the lawyers and everyone involved in the reparations for those who lost loved ones or who were maimed during this process, and just to find out what is stalling. Is there a way we could mediate to expedite this process? That's the third part. That's the second part. The third part is some kind of truth and reconciliation process. I was touched by the only woman who spoke at today's memorial service. She confirmed what we know about women, that at the end of the day, they're not the ones who start wars. But when there's violence, they're the ones who carry the can. And she said what she wants is reconciliation. She wants closure. And of course, there can be no reconciliation without justice, and there can be no justice without restitution. So people need to get around the table. But what I sense from the young woman who spoke today is that they want to move on with their lives.
All right, so I'm glad that you touched a bit on what transpired at the commemoration earlier on, because I wanted to get your take on what AMCU President Joseph Mathunjwa said, saying that he had approached you to come and help the people of Marikana, but you said to him you do not interfere in the private sector. You surely were listening to him saying that. Would you like to respond to that?
Absolutely. I heard Mr. Mathunjwa, and again, my heart goes out to him and to everyone who has lost through this process, whether as a widow, as an orphan, or people who were maimed. And my heart goes out to him, Mr. Mathunjwa, and my respect goes to him, to Bishop Paul Ferrain, and or to Advocate Thuli and others. I have no doubt of their sincerity. But Mr. Mathunjwa is, with due respect, wrong on two counts. One, he publicly accused me of being paid for the memorial lecture. I've never been paid for a memorial lecture. I give memorial lectures in South Africa and globally to honor the memory of the people who have departed, to draw lessons from those memories so that we can rebuild anew and move society forward, particularly on issues of social justice. I wasn't paid for the Marikana Memorial Lecture. I did it for free. So that's the first thing he accused me of, wrongfully. Secondly, he did ask me to intervene as the Pub Protector. And as you know, and everyone knows, the Pub Protector does not have authority in the public sector. This was before the killing. This was in the early days of the conflict, where the perpetrator was being asked to come and adjudicate or conciliate between Lonmin and AMCU. At that stage, we had no power. The only time we had power, and a member of the public asked me to intervene, was after the killings, after the state had been accused of wrongfully killing people or using gratuitous and excessive power, state power. There we had authority. But just as we were reviewing the request, the Farlam Commission was appointed, and therefore I couldn't intervene.
All right. So just in conclusion, Prof, let's just go back to your favorite topic. You've touched a bit on it, that of justice. I know that it's a sore point for all affected parties. But you say that on those few days, from the 12th to the 16th of August 2012, the fabric of society was tampered with. How did you deal with this particular topic of justice when you delivered that inaugural memorial lecture on Friday?
Yes, Palisa, I did say the fabric of society was tampered with in the days that led to the killing of 44 people in Marikana. The trust between the state and people was broken. The trust between business and labor was worsened. The lack of trust was worsened. What we have before us right now is an opportunity to look back at what happened. And in the memorial lecture, I suggest that Marikana happened because we forgot to remember that this country was built on extractive relationships, where capital was here to extract as much as possible and leave villages in devastation. The very fact that South Africa is the only country I know of where miners didn't have houses for families was part of that extractive relationships. That men were paid as little as possible and women were left with children in the villages, not enough money to raise children who themselves could be independent and be able to lift themselves up. So there was as little money as possible so that the Black community could be labor reservoirs. So that was our history. When we adopted a new constitution in 1990, to look at how do we then turn things around? So firstly, we had to remember, heal, as the Constitution talks about, healing the divisions of the past and establishing a society based on democratic values, social justice, and human rights. We needed to look at how do we undo the past and its legacy to build this new society before we talk about renewal. And as Justice Edwin Cameron says in Daniels versus Kribante, the past is not done with us. It remains with us until we reckon with its claim to justice. So Marikana happened because we didn't deal with the past. And today, through the process started by Sibanye, Stillwater, and others, we have an opportunity to look at the past, the present, and co-create the future that we want. An inclusive future where we can grow together, where we can prosper together, where there will be work, wealth, and well-being for all.
All right. So just very quickly now, Prof, just in conclusion this time around, you've also made that call to South Africans to always remember the deaths of these 44 people who died in the Marikana massacre 8 years ago. How do we keep the conversations going? Because you've got people saying that the people of Marikana are always remembered just on this day. We've said enough about them today, and then we'll do the same again on the day next year. So how do we keep the conversations going, and how do we ensure that at the end of the day, justice will be served to the victims?
I think that's where Stellenbosch can come in, and not just my unit. There's a unit that is about restorative conversations. It is headed by Phumla Madikizela. And Phumla works with Verwoerd's grandson to help people to converse about the past and its impact on the present and how do we move forward together. And you're right, let's take the next 365 days to converse with this so that when we come to the Marikana Memorial services next year, we are we come together to report on progress made, on reconciliation made, and on promises kept.
All right, Prof, I'm afraid time constraints, we have to leave it at that, but we thank you so much for your time here on the SABC News.